Another question there, why you should do a podcast. I think everyone has a podcast inside themselves, the same as a
Hmm.
book. Then, of course, it's how many would listen to it. Why do you do it? It could be an internal podcast for like an organization. But there are podcasts, everything under the sun.
I'm Sean Hessinger, and this is Small Biz in 15, the show where we bring you small business news and tips to make your small business better. Today, Martin Lindeskog, new media advisor and podcaster at Tea Party Media, discusses how to podcast like Joe Rogan. So, Martin, what is a podcast and how does it work?
So very simple, I would say. It's like an audio blog with an RSS feed. So you could subscribe to it, follow it, getting notification when a new episode is coming. So it's an audio format, but then of course it's a but. It could be video, it could be a mix, it could be other things included in the podcast. But I would say audio content that you could follow and subscribe to and getting notification.
What are the most popular types of podcasts?
Depending on what's your cup of tea and what you like. And I'm not probably in the majority there, but according to Apple Podcasts, that still have this, that was called before iTunes and now Apple Podcasts, they have certain categories, and maybe we could include that in the so-called the show notes or in blog post or in the comments. Several categories there. So, for example, that's not my cup of tea. Maybe I have a sensitive person, but I am not into crimes and horror stories and whatnot. That's a huge category. Same thing with comics or how to say, parody, humor, this kind of thing. Another, of course, is politics, news, sports, business, but you have also history. I mean, I have a podcast together with two co-hosts about stationery called Pen Meets Paper. So we talk about, I'm a new media advisor working with digital, but here I'm now showing a pencil from Denmark called Viking. Because it's something, I took the notes in order to answer your questions on a note card. This is like, you could talk about that on a podcast. How does it feel when you write on a paper? What's triggering you? How to remember things, thinking on paper, etc. So you could be very niched and very, there you have a narrow cast. You could get very nerdy, geeky, whatever. And you could be very broad also. But it's a podcast for everyone out there. Another question there, why you should do a podcast. I think everyone has a podcast inside themselves, the same as a book. Then, of course, it's how many would listen to it. Why do you do it? It could be an internal podcast for like an organization. But there are podcasts, everything under the sun.
I think that leads to our next question, which is probably a big question, but probably we should ask it anyway, which is, what is the main purpose of a podcast?
That's, this Simon says, Simon Sinek, the why are you doing it? Same thing with blogging, same thing with everything. But it's a good book there by Mark Schaefer called Known, or To Be Known for Something. So that could be that you want to be, known for something. And also, and that's probably the second question following up there, what it could lead to. But a great documentary about podcasting, about indie podcasters, is called The Messengers. So you have a message somehow. You want to maybe change the world, change the business climate, learn, spread the good word about the passion and interest and hobby, whatnot. So that's why you have a purpose, that you want to spread something.
The first thing you said was about being known for something. And that made me think of our next question, which is, what can a podcast do for a business? Of course, one of the things a business is trying to do is get known for something.
Yeah. So this book by Mark is great to get that, because some are celebrities, some are known for certain things, But you could be known for your profession, your interests, your skills, your experience, your story, your life story. That's, I mean, thing you could do like a documentary, as I said. Is it Gary Vaynerchuk that said, document your process, your business, doing snippets.
Right.
So that could be like a journey. So for an organization, for a business, instead of saying, oh, now I have to write another article or blog post, turn on the mic, right? If you have a podcast episode, you have material for a blog post, and you could embed the podcast player in your blog. And the other way around, you write an article, and then you could do commentary in a podcast episode, or you take a photo for your artwork for the episode. So it's all kind of things of that. So, but it's also, I see, if you have guests, then they could say, I have been on radio. Because it's not everyone that gets invited to the big radio stations or TV stations or getting interviewed in the big newspaper. But to come as a guest to a podcast, and then you could use that also in your business. I have been an expert, or I've been a speaker, or invited to talk about this topic. And when it comes from that angle, that somebody else is asking a question or interview or having a conversation.
Martin, what equipment do you need to be a podcaster? I imagine you'd be the one to ask about this because you've got a podcast.
Yeah, and that's often coming from that. I know what kind of shiny gadgets do I have to have, and we all like it, right? But I would say a microphone. I have used lavalier mic. You could record directly into your smartphone, especially if you have an iPhone. I understand that that's a good, microphone in it, and also combined and linked in a good way. Because at the end you want to have this MP3 file that you could upload to a host, like an audio hotel. So some kind of recording equipment, like a microphone, lavalier, or standalone microphone, or a special app. I've used, for example, an application called Ringer, and there you could have very simple, earbuds that are together with your phone, and with a microphone on the cord. So, and then of course a good surrounding is good to have, but but it sounds in a good way. And then some kind of, as I said, recording. It could be software. It could be an app. It could be directly on your computer. And then somewhere to store it. And that's what I call an audio hotel or a podcast host. So that then of course you could have, as I have here in background, like an absorbent material. You could have boom arms. You could have lights if you're doing live streaming. You could have all kind of things, extra equipment. And of course, with when you're doing editing or post-production, you could have different software and equipment. And then you could have other things also that you want during, if you have a long show, like where do you have your bullet points or show notes, or if you have a teleprompter, you could have it all kind of, you could build it so it turn out into a studio if you really want that also.
I think you started to answer this next question, but because you said about storing it.
Yeah.
Where do I put podcasts once I record these files? I mean, where do I post them?
Yeah, you store it then on a host, similar to like a web host, but then you have it for the audio. So because you have this special format called MP3 that's have become a standard. So you want to have that at the end, and then you upload that episode together with like a title and a description, and then it will be stored at that hotel. Because if you get lots of traffic, if you have it on your own site, that could be complicated. With lots of, it's like it will get like this ping or signal they want to listen to an episode. And that could, if you have it on your own site, that could be very hard if you get lots of traffic. But I'm not a technical person, so that's not my advice to put it on your site. But if you know what you're doing, you could self-host also. But maybe a bit more technical. But it's lots of podcast hosts out there. The interesting times now is what the hosts are offering, because it's now competition, friendly competition. It could be the taste, it could be the flavor of the hosting, the service, the experience, added features. And again, as I'm talking about this podcasting 2.0 initiative, if you have this kind of like transcript, for example, as one example, or this value for value, to look out what are the podcast hosts doing and developing over time.
Can we name just a couple of them? A couple of the popular
Yeah, I could do
places
that.
you post
I mean,
podcasts?
one of them, the main one that I'm using today is Captivate. It's based in England. And what I liked with them personally was that I could have several podcasts at the same account. They have their business model there is you have a certain downloads per month. And my podcasts are mostly, according to me, pretty small, but focused and niched, so I could have several podcasts. Otherwise, in other hosts, you have to pay for every podcast. Another one that's leading for a long time is Libsyn, Liberated Syndication. A new one that I really see that have, and I could joke a bit, but Todd Cochran, he's a small business owner called Blueberry. He said publicly that I have been nudging him to listen to the podcasting 2.0. And when he shifted, he said he was focused now on the, like you could say, the leading or the early adopters to implement these new podcast 2.0 features. So that's fascinating to see. And again, it's friendly competition. It's what kind of style, flavor you like. And you could, if it's a good host, you're not stuck into it. Then you could move for whatever reason. But the big one that I mentioned, Libsyn, Blueberry, Captivate, Buzzsprout, I will come up with more when I'm thinking about it. I could do a long list for you if you want.
Maybe the $1 million question here, which everybody probably wants to know, because if they want to do a podcast, they want to succeed at it. How do you make a podcast popular? Now, I know that's
and what's popular? What's the word popular?
Right. Do we mean popular in terms of numbers, in terms of hitting your audience? But to succeed in reaching your audience, how do you do that?
I would say, for example, word of mouth, doing that marketing, invite listeners to become almost co-producers, like sending donations, sending a digital telegram. They are into the action, like in real time. Then they will spread the good word. Listen, I'm mentioned here, or I added 2 cents to the conversation. Again, if you, Sean, if you listen to podcast and tell 10 of your friends to listen. So that's the thing. This is like the guerrilla marketing. It's spreading the good word. And it's also to ask about it, to say. That's why you hear about this, subscribe, follow, like, and all this kind of thing. But again, it's in it. What's in it for the listeners? Maybe they have listened or seen in mainstream media about the top so-called A bloggers or A podcasters. A guy like Joe Rogan, for example, and then they think they should be like that. But he has a long history, everything from stand-up comedy to in the sports to commentary and whatnot. But he have done the grind and worked on it for a long time. But you could be popular in your niche. I would say that's why, again, everyone has a podcast.
Well, that's it for another episode of Small Biz in 15. Thanks again to Martin Lindeskog. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the show, and please leave a comment and let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in future programs. For more small business news and tips, join us at smallbiztrends.com.